So based on Daphne du Maurier's short story and originally purchased for use on the Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV show a decade before this film's final release, 1963's The Birds is, for me, the last great Hitchcock film. Predating The Force of Nature attacks a small community subgenre that would later include films like Jaws and The Fog. Hitch's Birds Run Amok film takes one of nature's most non-threatening creatures and turns them into menacing, inescapable monsters. Let's take a look. Hi, I'm Stephen at Real Classic Film Reviews. Click that subscribe button to keep up to date with all things classic movies, and let me know in the comments below what you think of this film and which Hitchcock movie is your favourite. So, The Birds, I think, could have been the first Hitchcock film I ever saw, or certainly the first time I was aware I was watching a Hitchcock film. I caught it on late night TV and it scared the life out of me at the time. It is an unusual Hitchcock film in many ways. You know, it's not brimming with double crosses and plot twists like some of his earlier work, and it's arguably more terrifying than his previous feature, that little-known motel set slasher film, Psycho. So as the film opens, we meet our main character, Melanie Daniels, played here by Tippi Hedren, in a pet store as she waits for a delivery of a minor bird. It's here that she runs into a guy named Mitch Brenner, played by Rod Taylor, and she poses as a pet shop employee in a bit of a flirtatious practical joke.
Yes, what is it you're looking for, sir?
Lovebird.
Lovebird, sir?
Yes, I understand there are different varieties. Is that true?
Oh, yes, there are.
However, he figures out who she is and doesn't really appreciate practical jokes as much as she does. And by way of an apology, Melanie follows Mitch to his home in Bodega Bay, a sleepy little seaside town about 60 miles north of San Francisco, to deliver some lovebirds to him, which in hindsight seems like a little bit of a creepy move. However, nowhere near as creepy as what's to follow, as shortly after setting off to deliver these birds, a seagull attacks Melanie on a rowing boat in a totally freak occurrence that turns out to be a chilling precursor of things to come. Now, the uncomfortable vibe of this whole film kicks in here, and it's not long after this that the avian madness breaks out of nowhere and the sleepy little town is turned upside down. So Natalie K. Hedren, or Tippi Hedren as cinemagoers would know her, plays Melanie Daniels, and this was actually Hedren's first credited film role. She'd go on to star in Hitchcock's underrated Marnie the following year, and has worked almost non-stop since, even appearing in the TV movie sequel to this film, The Birds 2: Land's End, which we won't talk about here. The latest entry into the director's icy blonde leading ladies, Hedren was put through the ringer for this film, at one point having live birds tied to her clothes to create some ultra-realistic bird attack scenes. Bless her. And then we have Australian actor Rod Taylor playing Mitch Brenner. You'll probably know him from 1960's The Time Machine, or as the voice of Pongo in Walt Disney's animated 101 Dalmatians. Now, if I'm honest, I find Rod Taylor a little bit meh in this. He doesn't hold the screen as well as the Cary Grants and Rock Hudsons of this era. But to be honest, he does fit the role well, especially in the scenes where he's getting henpecked by his overbearing mother, the late great Jessica Tandy. And yes, that is a young Veronica Cartwright of Alien fame playing his much younger sister. Special mention also going to Suzanne Plachette, playing one of Mitch's old flames who awkwardly still lives locally and strikes up a kind of friendship with Melanie, creating a bizarre love triangle, or square if you include Mitch's meddling mother. And this is where The Birds, like Jaws did a little bit later on, succeeds in comparison to some more modern attempts at this kind of high concept film. It takes just enough time to develop the characters' relationships to one another and continues to do so throughout the film. You could probably make a cut of this movie that removed all the bird violence and it would still be a pretty interesting drama. Now, one of the things that did stand out to me rewatching The Birds was these almost surreal long pauses in a few of the dialogue scenes. Hitchcock being happy to have the actors just kind of stare at each other or the ground for a long period of time. It's quite unnerving and almost Kubrick-like in a way, and it adds to the film's overall sense of dread. Adding again to this is the absence of any kind of actual musical score. Bernard Herrmann was always the mastermind behind many of Hitchcock's musical scores, and here he's credited as the sound consultant or the sound designer. And along with Hitchcock, they both cleverly weave together a wall of bird sounds that provide the soundtrack to the attacks. And it works a treat because the centrepiece here, of course, is the actual bird attacks themselves, which still remain pretty unsettling 5 decades later. Hitchcock and his editor George Tomasini pulling out all the stops, and although early 60s visual effects don't quite hold up to modern standards, they created set pieces here that feature shots such as school children running down an endless country road in terror, and Hedren's bad decision to seek shelter in a phone booth in the middle of an explosive mass bird attack. In fact, I think The Birds is more of a horror film than Psycho, which arrived a few years previously. And the more I watch Psycho, great as it is, the more I feel it's more of a psychological thriller, despite it topping many greatest horror movie of all time lists. There are sequences in The Birds that are straight out of the George Romero Night of the Living Dead rulebook, with our heroes holed up in a house as a terrifying menace waits outside. A late sequence of Tippi Hedren hearing a noise up in the attic and unwisely going up to investigate is brilliantly executed and would give many modern horrors a run for their money. And that bit where Jessica Tandy pays a visit to the local farmer features a jump scare that's up there with that head in the boat moment from Jaws and gets me every time. The great thing about The Birds is, at its core, it's a straight-up monster movie where the monster just happens to be an endless torrent of birds, and you can enjoy it as such. And much has been made about how Tippi Hedren's character is to blame for the events of the film. At one point, a crazed citizen actually says as much.
Who are you? What are you? Where did you come from? I think you're the cause of all this. I think you're evil! Evil!
And to be fair, the more you see it, the more you do notice a correlation between some of the film's themes of jealousy and the attacks themselves. An example is this scene during an ill-fated birthday party.
Look! Hey! No touching allowed!
And there's a few of these scenes scattered about the film if you look closely. So Alfred Hitchcock made 83 movies, and The Birds, I think, was his 78th. With its genuine frights and famously chilling ending, and as I said in the intro, this for me was one of Hitchcock's greatest movies. In the 5 years between 1958 and 1963, Hitchcock knocked out Vertigo, North by Northwest, Psycho, and this, The Birds. Phenomenal run. Go check it out.